audience and others throughout the community that are affected by it. I think in particular of our friends from Safari West who some of them lost their houses, but they saved all the animals that they care for. So I know that these are hard times. These are hard times, and I hope that today brings you a little bit of hope in what I think might be otherwise pretty hopeless times. But I'm really excited about today. We've got some amazing conservationists who are going to share with us their inspiring stories from the field. Are you all excited? All right. I was getting ready to ask that question twice, but you guys have a lot of energy. That's great. So I'm Jean-Gaël, Collomb, the Executive Director of the Wildlife Conservation Network. I'm a city kid. I grew up in Paris, in France, in a tiny little apartment next to the oldest zoo in Europe. I had pets growing up, but I always knew that I wanted to work with wildlife. I devoured Nat Geos and magazines and watched TV shows, watched Ian Douglas Hamilton and Jane Goodall on TV. I knew that this is what I wanted to do. I probably also inherited a bit of wanderlust from my dad and my grandfather, who traveled the world, and they would send letters or postcards or bring back trinkets, and so I was always inspired to travel and go on an adventure. And it wasn't a surprise to anybody who knew me that I would always pack my bags as soon as I could. When I was 17, I moved from France to come to the States to study at university. While I was at the university, the first chance I had, I went off in the Peruvian Amazon for a 2-week training course that introduced me to ecology. And then when I was 21, I had the good fortune to move to Gabon, where I ended up in the middle of a national park for the first of several years living out there. And on my very first night, I had an elephant pretty much an arm's length away from my window. It wasn't a real window, actually. It was kind of a hole in the wall with a mosquito netting. And I knew it was going to be a great life, and it has been an amazing life. But I could never really focus on a single species myself. I'm one of those people that kind of struggles with choices and decisions. You could probably ask our staff or my wife. And I think that everything is interconnected. I'm fascinated by lots of different things. If you ask me what species is my favorite, I'll give you a different answer every day of the week, or probably every day. And I don't just say that because I've got to be fair amongst all the conservationists. I really struggle with which species is my favorite. And so for me, WCN is a great fit because I get to work with people who share this holistic view, and we get to work across a number of different species. And unfortunately, a number of species need help. In my lifetime alone, we've lost half of the world's animals. In the past 25 years alone, we've lost half of the world's lions. At Giant Stadium, forget which direction, probably this way, if we put the entire lion population in that stadium would still look about half empty or half full, because I'm an optimist, so I like to look at things that way. And you've heard that story for many other species, for elephants, for species that you might not be so familiar with unless you've been coming to expos quite a bit, but same thing for great green macaws, Andean cat, Ethiopian wolves, and even species that you might take for granted, like giraffes. In the past 30 years, we've lost almost half of the world's giraffes. Now that's unacceptable, but there is hope. And the hope, to me, comes from all the conservationists that we're about to hear from today, whose stories really illustrate their dedication to face adversity and who are giving a fighting chance to these species that we all care for. And hope also comes from my family. It's my daughter who raised $40 through a lemonade stand for wildlife, and then she was outdone. I'm really happy that she was outdone by our 7-year-old who's been coming to WCN Expo, who raised $150 for Save the Elephants. And then you could do many other things. You could buy 2 million acres of wildlands in Patagonia and convert it into protected areas, like our guest speaker, Chris Tompkins, who will speak later today, and her late husband, Doug. So there are many, many different ways that we can help. We all have a different contribution to make. We just have to find out what that is. It could be sharing the stories that you hear today with your friends, with your family. It could be making this your career. It could be making this a very intensive or a very expensive hobby. You could be writing checks. You could be going to the field. There are plenty of things you can do. You just need to find out what that thing is, how it matches with your passion and the needs of the folks in the field. And then you're joining our movement to make this world a better place. And we need a lot of people joining this movement. So I want to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about the Wildlife Conservation Network and how to take advantage of the expo today. We exist to save wildlife. And we believe that field-based conservationists are uniquely placed to ensure that people and wildlife can coexist and thrive. Because when they live in the field, they live and breathe the realities of what it takes to develop collaborative solutions. And that's really what it's going to take. It's those conservationists. We were founded in 2002 to create an organization that would efficiently and effectively connect these passionate field conservationists with equally passionate supporters like yourselves, so that together we could help them enhance their mission, achieve it faster, better, and make sure that it was sustainable over the long term. So since our relatively humble beginnings in 2002, and there may be people in this room who have been with us for that long, but thanks to your support, we've grown about 20% a year. And collectively over that time frame, you all have generously contributed over $80 million to support the cause of these wildlife conservationists. So I want to give you a huge thank you for all that support. About 90% of those funds go to support our programs. And if you want to designate your funds to go to a particular species, would it be blue whales or elephants or giraffes or lions, we'll guarantee that 100% of those funds go to that species. Charity Navigator, which ranks over 8,000 nonprofit organizations on their financial well-being, transparency, and accountability, gives WCN a top 100 score and the top rank amongst all wildlife conservation charities. That's just one metric, and it's probably the least important metric, because what we're really most proud of is the impact of our conservationists. And it's been a really exciting year for WCN and for conservationists we work with. So as I said, we exist to save wildlife. And to do so, we invest in field-based conservationists. We have 17 long-term partners working in Africa, Latin America, and Asia. And we provide financial and technical support to those organizations so that they can achieve their mission more efficiently, more effectively, and also over the long term. This is going to be a long marathon, and we need to be with those organizations for a long time. These organizations are the heart and soul of the Wildlife Conservation Network, and they're all here today, and I encourage you to go meet them and to support them. In addition, in order to broaden our impact and help address some of the conservation threats at a more range-wide level, this year we launched a lion recovery fund inspired by the work that we have been doing with Save the Elephants on the Elephant Crisis Fund. Now, these funds provide more catalytic, relatively more short-term support at a project level rather than at the level of your organizations, so that we can have a broader impact over a much larger range. And through those funds, we've been able to support over 160 different projects and supported 50 different organizations. In addition, because we have a spirit of abundance and generosity, we like to try to find opportunities to help other conservationists. And so we will have 4 guest speakers today who'll speak about blue whales, speak about giraffes, about great green macaws, or about rewilding Patagonia. And then we also invest in the next generation of conservationists through WCN's scholarship program. So, we've also been growing our community. Several of you have been coming to expos for a long time. We've had these expos here in the fall for over 15 years, but we also started doing expos in the spring throughout the peninsula. We had one in Marin County last year. We'll do another one, most likely on the peninsula next year. We've had expos outside of San Francisco, some in Houston, some in Chicago. So we're trying to broaden our reach because we want to make this pie bigger. We want to get more people involved so that we can have a real wildlife conservation movement and get people excited and committed to the cause. So we do this face-to-face, but we also try to do this digitally. We're present on all the social media platforms. In fact, if you know somebody who would love to be here today but cannot, I'm not going to say this very often, but you can grab your phone, text them, email them, and tell them to follow us live on YouTube if you want to follow the stream downstairs, or on Facebook if you want to follow the stream upstairs. And all these talks are being recorded, and you could watch them later. We're here today because we share this common passion for wildlife. If the numbers are correct, and I think it'll move throughout the day, but we're expecting about 1,200 people to attend an expo. And that's an amazing group of people, and I want that number to grow. So every year I do a bit of an exercise. If you could raise your hand if you've been coming to 10 or more expos, please raise your hand. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for your support for so long. Please raise your hand now if you've been coming to 5 or more expos. Okay. How about people for whom this is the second expo? Raise your hand if this is your second expo. Okay. And if this is your first expo? Wow. Cool. Well, welcome. Welcome to this community. As you saw, it's a community that's deep. It goes a long way. And I always give an assignment that if you've come here once, you have to commit to come here again next year, and you have to bring a friend. So obviously this room is not full, so some people aren't doing their homework. You might tell me, well, wait a minute, capacity at Mission Bay is only 1,000 people, so that could be 2,000. You won't be able to see this all. That's okay. That's a good problem to have. I want to have that problem. Just come back and bring friends. That's what we really want. We want to grow this community. I want to say a little bit about how to take advantage of a day. Today is really designed for you to meet the conservationists, meet each other, and grow this network. So don't be shy. Come and talk to us, talk to each other, talk to the conservationists, the folks who will be on stage, but also their colleagues, all the organizations that are outside. We've invited over 50 organizations outside, and they all do really interesting work. It is all worthy of your support. So go out or stay inside and mingle with all those folks and try to learn about them, try to learn how you can help them, and try to learn how they can help you. It is all about us being in this together. I have to cover a few housekeeping items, and so I want to make sure that after you've texted your friends that they could follow us on Facebook, you turn off your cell phones. As you saw, I have a young daughter, so I want to make sure that everybody knows to make sure that they go to the bathroom. The bathrooms are both upstairs and downstairs. You can ask adults to figure out where those are. We want you to mingle with people, so we've built the sessions so that in between each session there's about 30 minutes for you to go outside, talk to people, buy some stuff. It's all supports a worthy cause. But I know those conversations can be a little bit enthralling, and so it might be hard to remember that you've got to come back and listen to somebody else speak. So there'll be somebody walking around with a cowbell, and when you hear that cowbell, it means that you've got about 5 minutes before the next talk begins. So wrap up your purchase, wrap up your conversation, and come back in. We also provide boxed lunches. Mission Bay actually charges us $37 for these boxed lunches, and we sell them back to you for $15. But we sold out already. So I was going to tell you, go and buy your lunch early. I can't do that. Hopefully you have a lunch box. If you do not, you can go to our front desk, and they'll direct you to a few places where you can buy lunches nearby. There's a Starbucks and a Subway about a block away. There's a cafe here. So you shouldn't starve, and I want you to stay throughout the whole day. Another incentive to stay throughout the whole day. Some of you last year might have been caught in a traffic jam from hell in the parking lot because they decided to only have one person staffing it, only one gate open. So some people might have spent several hours, sadly, in that parking lot. So we're not going to do that this year. After 5 p.m., parking will be free, and we'll get them to open up all 4 gates. You'll have to give your tickets to the attendants there or to WCN volunteers, but we'll cover the parking after 5 p.m., and so you can stay longer. And hopefully don't all leave at 5, because there's actually a session starting at 5, so stay a bit later than that. I want to thank a number of people. I want to thank our sponsors, without whom we couldn't do this event. I've already mentioned our dear friends at Safari West, as well as the San Diego Zoo Global, the Sacramento Zoo, the Houston Zoo, Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, and the Leiden Foundation. So if we could give them a round of applause and thank them for our support, that'd be great. And I also want to thank our volunteers. We've got probably over 100 people working this event today. And WCN started from relatively humble beginnings, and we could not be where we are today without the support of our volunteers. So whatever it is, having cups of water for us here on stage, opening the doors, helping the conservationists unpack their stuff, all those little things that all of you as volunteers are doing today or have done for us throughout the years or at other events are making a huge difference for wildlife, and I want to give a huge round of applause to our volunteers. Thank you. And of course, I want to thank all of you. The simple fact that you are here today speaks volume, and not just to the conservationists who are here on stage, but to the thousands of people that they represent, who work with them on their teams, the communities that they interact with, the government people that they interact with, all those people who are making choices every day in their lives to live more in harmony with wildlife and with our environment. They don't always realize how much people thousands of miles away actually care. And so when you come here, conservationists see it, and they can go back and they can say, I had a crowd of 1,000 people. I had people coming and telling me, thank you. It's not just for me, it's for all the work that we all do. So thank you so much for all of that. It really does speak volume and inspires us. Because we all have a different way to contribute. As I said, it could be finding your passion. It could be volunteering. It could be making this your career. It could be studying poop. Yeah. There are people who study poop and who make this their career. So you never know where it's going to come from. And that's a segue to introduce my new great friend. I met Asha a few days ago, and she's an incredible woman. She'll tell you more about poop, but also about many other things. Her work has been featured in a number of magazines and on TV. You might have seen her as a TED speaker. She's had over 1 million views as a TED speaker. She's been recognized with numerous international awards. She's a Pew Fellow. She is a member of, I can never remember that one, the Global Economic Council as a young leader. I probably got it in the wrong order. Jack Johnson recently recognized her as an ocean hero. She's a National Geographic explorer. The list goes on and on. She's a very accomplished woman. She's the first PhD in Sri Lanka on marine mammal research. And it is incredible to see her passion for her work to protect the coastlines with blue whales as one of those key species and inspire her citizens and the youth of the world to take better care of our planet. So it's a great pleasure to introduce and welcome my new friend, Dr. Asha Devos.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Do I have a clicker? Oh, thank you. All right. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Oh, thank you so much for being here. I know I'm up against Ian, who's upstairs, but do remember that it takes 40 of his little mammals to balance out one of my large ones. So you've made the right choice, obviously. So, oh, that's me, in case you can't see. I know I'm really short, and this room is pretty long, so. It was back in 2003. I was working on this whale research vessel, and we were actually tracking sperm whales acoustically. So we were dropping these underwater microphones into the water that we call hydrophones, and then we would track the whales, and as soon as we caught up with them, we'd take these tiny biopsy samples that could tell us all these things about the toxicology of the environment they were living in. At the same time, we always had someone up on deck looking out for signs of life. So on this particular day of interest and of significance, I would say, I happened to be the person up on deck. It was an incredibly beautiful, flat, calm day. Not a ripple on the surface, not a drop of wind, stinking hot. But I was out there because I was looking for these sperm whales that we'd been tracking all through the night. I could hear their calls emanating through the pilot house floor from below, but I just couldn't see them. I knew what I was looking for because I'd been tracking sperm whales for a little while by this point. This low, bushy blow slanted off onto the left-hand side, which is super characteristic of a sperm whale, sorry. So I did know what I was looking for, but I just couldn't see them. I looked and I stared into the sun and I searched, and that's when I saw this. A tall, vertical, powerful blow. It was so big, it looked like it rose all the way to the sky, and honestly, at that point, I knew that it could only have been produced by an animal that was gigantic. So I got really excited, and I grabbed the walkie-talkie that was wrapped on the railing in front of me, and I called down to my captain, and I said, Bob, we must go. 11 o'clock, 2 kilometers. And he says, why? And I say, I think it's a blue whale. So he says, sure. And then he turns the boat, goes off track, starts charging the direction that I sent him off in. And I'm now panicking because I'm thinking, I can't afford to lose sight of this animal. So I'm staring, I'm paranoid, I'm trying to focus really hard. I'm looking into the sun, there's tears streaming down my cheeks. And that's when I start to think I'm actually losing my mind. Because it wasn't just one blue whale I was seeing, but there were 6 blue whales in an area the size of a soccer pitch. So I am standing there thinking, why on earth would an animal, the largest that's ever roamed the planet, growing to the length of a basketball court, choose to aggregate in this tiny spot in a warm tropical ocean when it can roam 70% of our planet? But I was fresh out of undergrad, so I knew I had the answers. I reflected, and I remembered. My textbooks and my professors all told me that large whales, like blue whales, undertake long-range migrations between cold feeding areas and warm breeding and calving areas. Sri Lanka is 5 degrees above the equator. It's as warm and as tropical as you can get. So at this point, I was really stoked. Because I was going to be the first person in the world to ever record blue whales having sex. And you would have been as excited as me, I promise. So of course at this point I'm like, okay Bob, this is going to be amazing. We just have to get there really fast. And so we're cruising and we're moving closer and closer and closer, and we're getting there, and like finally we are there, and you know what? It's not at all what you expect it to be. There's not a single whale penis in sight. There are no babies. And these whales are just kind of like hanging out. They're lolling at the surface. Some of them dive, they come back up. The dreams I'd created for myself over the last 2 kilometers of my life are now shattered. I'm thinking, what am I going to do with my life? Obviously, because this was going to be, obviously, my moment. So sheepishly, I go up to Captain Bob, and I'm like, hey, Bob, do you think that maybe we can hang around a little longer? And he says, yeah, sure, okay. I guess I've taken him completely off track anyways, so. And I'm sure glad I did, because that's when I saw this. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a pile of blue whale poop. It's not just amazing because of its stunning red color. And of course, here's when I put out my challenge. I say, if you ever come across a more beautiful looking poop, please email me. But what's most incredible about this sighting is that when I saw this, I knew that these animals were feeding somewhere close. But remember what I told you. Blue whales go to cold feeding areas and just breed and calve in warm places. And Sri Lanka's in the tropics. So these whales had figured out how to actually feed in warm waters. This was my eureka moment. Not everyone can say their career started with a pile of shit. But mine did. And I'm super excited about that. But, literally, this was the moment that spiraled into me, pioneering blue whale research in the entire northern Indian Ocean. And I've been on this incredible adventure ever since. I've basically gone on to name these whales the unorthodox whales because they break the stereotypes that we'd built for them. They're doing something different. They actually are non-migratory. They're the only population of non-migratory blue whales in the world. They remain in warm tropical waters throughout their lives, which is incredible. And they actually can do this because these waters in Sri Lanka are more productive than you would expect for that latitude because of the unique position of Sri Lanka in this enclosed ocean basin that has this amazing, unusual monsoonal climate. They have a different acoustic dialect. If I took one of these blue whales and I dropped them in the ocean off here in California, the blue whales wouldn't be able to speak to each other. They're actually the smallest of all the blue whales in our oceans. To be fair, they're a population of pygmy blue whales because they grow up to 80 feet and not 100 feet. And they also have different behavioral adaptations. The ones in Sri Lanka, they lift their tail flukes up before a deep dive more often than anywhere else in the world. So it's a complete photographer's dream. And all over the world, we call blue whales stenophagous. That means they specialize to feed on only one kind of prey, which is krill. But these blue whales, they feed on something different. And while I can proudly say that no country within the northern Indian Ocean has ever engaged in hunting for whales or whaling, in the 60s there was illegal Soviet whaling that took out 1,294 of these individuals from this small patch of ocean. That's about the same number of people we're hoping will attend this expo today, right? But as many of you know, whaling is now almost an obsolete problem for whales. It's not the biggest problem that they face. There are tons of others out there. And in the case of the blue whales from Sri Lanka, the biggest problem is ship strike. So let's have a look at a map of global shipping pathways. I know it's crazy, there's lots of lines, but don't panic. Just look at the yellow lines, because the yellow lines are where you'll find the busiest shipping lanes in all of the world. And then if we zoom into the small area around Sri Lanka, the northern Indian Ocean, what you'll notice is that the south coast of Sri Lanka is actually home to one of the busiest shipping lanes in the entire world. Everything from Singapore to Dubai travels through these areas. So that's two of the biggest ports in the world. And while ship traffic has doubled globally, it has actually quadrupled in this part of the ocean, showing how trade is changing and the fact that actually traffic is just going to keep increasing. If we zoom in close and look at some of the data that I've been actually collecting over the years, the red lines are actually real ship movement data. So the redder it is, the more popular that route. And the black dots are sightings of blue whales that we have collected through our research. What will become immediately obvious when you look on the south coast is that there is distinct overlap between where we're seeing whales and where we're seeing ships. So sites like this are not surprising. This is a blue whale that came wrapped on the bow of a container ship into the main port in Colombo, Sri Lanka. We know it died on impact because it was a fresh carcass showing signs of internal hemorrhaging. 12 days later, we found another carcass floating at sea with a gigantic propeller gash. The thing is, evidence like this is not always available because quite often these carcasses will sink or will get pushed offshore, or if they do wash up onto shore, they are so deteriorated because of our warm tropical climate that it's hard to identify the cause of death. But we do know these are not isolated incidences because research of this very coastline here in California, where you experience the exact same problem, researchers have shown that for every whale that we document, at least 10 others go undocumented. So it's a problem. It's a big problem. But in my eyes, it's actually a resolvable problem, because if we can separate where we see the whales and where we see the ships, we can come up with some way to mitigate the issue. And this has become my crusade. So the whole thing here is that the main thing, I guess, is that we have to understand that ship strike is all of our fault. We're all to blame because 90% of everything is shipped. But that doesn't mean we just have to be part of the problem. We can be part of the solution. And using science, we've been able to show that, in fact, 90% of the vessels that use this shipping pathway are actually not coming into the local ports in Sri Lanka. They're bypassing the country. So if we shift shipping lanes 15 nautical miles offshore, we're actually separating where we're seeing the whales and the ships, which is a great thing. But we're also having a positive impact on the whale watching industry that uses these nearshore waters. We're increasing safety to the fishing fleets. And we're also allowing Sri Lanka to uphold some of the international agreements that we've been signatory to. And in this case, it's about reducing coastal pollution based out of ships. And then the other 10% that have to come in through nearshore waters because they're coming into our ports, well, if we can ask them to slow down over designated parts of our ocean where we know the whales are feeding or spending time, then we can have a significant positive impact. Because science has shown that below certain speeds, impact is not lethal. And that whale that was wrapped on the container ship, the issue there was that that ship was traveling at speeds far exceeding those speeds that can allow an animal to survive if it's hit. So that's what went wrong there. So now many of you might be wondering, why should we care? Or why do I care so much to dedicate my entire life to trying to figure out how to solve this problem and protect these whales? Well, many people think it's because these animals are charismatic and beautiful. And they are. They're definitely charismatic and beautiful. And then there's that thing, right? That incredible privilege that we have to live on a planet side by side with the biggest animal that has ever roamed. I think that's amazing. But if that's the only reason we're going to protect these whales, then we're doing them a complete disservice. Because whales are ecosystem engineers. Essentially, their existence in the environment allows the ecosystem to function properly. And they actually provide services to us, human society. So let me tell you a little bit about how saving whales is so important to the resiliency of the oceans. Whales dive to the depths to feed, and as they do so, they feed in areas where there are these nutrients that are completely missing from surface waters. So they feed in areas where there's iron and nitrogen, and then they come up to the surface to breathe, and they release these giant fecal plumes. These fecal plumes are full of nutrients. They're the ocean fertilizer. And they come up to the surface, and as it's released, they fertilize these tiny microscopic plants called phytoplankton that are the base of every single food chain in the ocean. So more phytoplankton means more of everything else. More fish, more krill, you name it. And then on top of that, phytoplankton, they eat sunshine for breakfast, peppered with this fertilizer, and they release oxygen into the environment. Do you know that every second breath you take comes courtesy of these little plants in the ocean? Gotta thank the ocean and perhaps even the poop. But besides the poop, whales are also really important in their death because their carcasses are the largest form of detritus to sink from the ocean surface all the way to the bottom of the ocean. They provide food to about 400 different species, including this really gross, slimy hagfish. And then, as these carcasses are sinking to the depths, they also take out excess carbon from the atmosphere down into the depths of the ocean. So scientists have calculated that whale fall annually will take out the equivalent of 190,000 tons of carbon, which is the same amount that's produced by 80,000 cars per year from the atmosphere down to the depths of the ocean. The deep ocean is what we call a carbon sink. Carbon sinks trap excess carbon, carbon sinks trap excess carbon from the atmosphere, therefore helping to delay the impacts of global warming. So these creatures do play a really important role in our lives. And now I'm sure all of you agree we need to save these animals, right? Right, good. But then there are also personal reasons why we get so passionate and so engaged with these creatures, and then we throw ourselves for the rest of our lives to try to figure out what we can do to protect them. In my work, quite a lot of the time, I use a very simple but very powerful technique called photo identification. Photo identification simply involves taking photographs of particular parts of an animal's body and looking for characteristic markings that can help us to identify and re-identify the individuals over and over again. So we can do things like estimate population size or figure out how old animals are. For blue whales, we take pictures of their tail flukes and the dorsal sides. And in 2011, I happened to be on a documentary shoot off the east coast of the country, and I took this picture. As soon as I saw it, I thought, I've seen this animal before. Luckily for me, before I started this research, there'd only been one paper ever published on the blue whales in Sri Lanka, and that was from the early 80s. So I went back to that one paper, and there were a few photographs of whales, and I found that. So that's a picture taken in 1984, and that's a picture taken in 2011, 27 years later. So we know that this whale is at least 27 years old, and because of the heart-shaped marking, I've named him Whalentine. And what's even cooler is the fact that where I saw this whale in 2011, which is the triangle, was just less than 10 kilometers away from where it was originally seen in 1984. So I can't tell you what this animal was doing in the intervening years. It could have packed its bags and gone on a gigantic holiday, or it could have hung around all that time. But that's why it's so important for people like myself to be on the ocean as much as possible, collecting this data, because it really allows us to try to hone how we invest ourselves and make sure that our conservation strategies are based on great science and a lot of good information. So you definitely think this work should go on, right? Oh, yeah. Okay, perfect. All right. Well, I come from Sri Lanka, beautiful tropical island. But the thing is, Sri Lanka has been identified as a priority area for marine conservation because it's an area of high species diversity, but also high impact. Unfortunately, less than 1% of our oceans have actually been protected, and it's listed as one of the 40 worst funded countries for conservation. So the generosity of people like yourself is exactly what keeps this work going. And at the end of a 30-year war, Sri Lanka is now going through this phase of unprecedented and unsustainable development in the name of economic growth. And we're not really paying much attention to our natural capital. When it comes to the marine environment, we really struggle to face the challenges we meet because of a lack of awareness about the oceans, but also a lack of capacity in the field of marine conservation. When I started my career, which is not a long time ago, I want everyone to know that, and I told people I want to be a marine biologist, everyone was like, what are you going to do with that? I mean, it makes no sense at all. It's a beautiful tropical island with jurisdiction over 8 times more ocean area than land area. But traditionally, our culture looked at the ocean as a place of extraction and not of protection. And suddenly, here I am saying, I want to save the ocean. And nobody could really get it. And that's actually helped me in some ways, because now, through my work, I've created a marine conservation movement in Sri Lanka, and more people than ever before want to go into this field and protect our oceans. But we do lack opportunity, and that's why I established Oceanswell. Oceanswell is the first marine conservation research and education organization in Sri Lanka. And through it, I want to make sure that I'm able to scale up and provide opportunities to this growing need in the region. Because I really believe in homegrown talent to address local issues, because that's what creates sustainability and allows us to achieve those conservation objectives. 70% of our planet is ocean, yet there's a disproportionate number of us working for it. 70% of our coastlines are in the developing world, but representation at the global stage is next to non-existent. If we really want to save our oceans, if we really want to make a difference, we need custodians on every single coastline who can empower, engage, and enable their people to care and change. And Oceanswell is all about nurturing those future ocean heroes, about providing opportunities to those students in underrepresented nations to conduct marine research, marine conservation research particularly, and also engaging everybody in the stories and conversations about the magic of the world's oceans. So to that end, there's plenty of opportunity for all of you to get involved. We are constantly, running education programs. We look for support for staying on the water. Boat days are expensive. We need equipment. We're trying to build a field center. And then on the other side, when I look at this room, I see all this incredible talent and skill. And we're always looking for people who can help us to build platforms that can host our education programs or build the games that we know are going to help to change the way people engage with the oceans. That's exactly what Oceanswell does. It's about creating inclusivity and diversity in the field of marine conservation, and it's about changing the people's attitudes and how they engage with the oceans. So, trust me, no donation is too big or too small, no skill is wasted. Please, I'm just outside here. Come to my table, have a chat. Let's explore how you can get involved. And blue whales, they are our flagship species. We can all come together to protect these animals and their homes. Thank you. I'm back.
I want to give a huge thank you to Asha's work. We can keep the door shut actually for a little bit. We have a few more minutes. I believe the session goes till 11, right? Okay, that's what I thought. So we have some time for some questions and answers. We'll be running 2 mics. Just raise your hand. We'll try to get you, and we'll get Asha to answer them.
Do you find that plastics are impacting the survival of the blue whales in your area?
So that's a great question. Plastics, we haven't seen any evidence because we have certain restrictions about conducting autopsies, so we don't know. But we know that plastics have affected large whales in other places like fin whales and stuff like that. So we imagine it is an issue. We see a lot of plastic pollution. We rescue turtles constantly, and they're wrapped in bits of plastic and nets and stuff. So it's definitely a growing issue in our oceans in general.
Doctor, have you been taking genetic samples? And if so, have you seen any concern in terms of dilution of the gene pool in the future for these animals?
Okay, so that's a super question, and a lot of people ask me that. We've had some restrictions up to now for doing genetic work in Sri Lanka, so the government has its own ways. So we haven't been able, as you all know, we haven't been able to do any genetic work up to now, but we're hoping we'll be able to do it in the near future. So we know it's a separate, we're pretty convinced it's a separate subspecies of a pygmy blue whale because it's acoustically distinct and all these other behaviors and stuff like that, though.
Over here.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to find out how receptive the Sri Lankan government has been to working to move those shipping lines and how that advocacy is going.
Okay, yeah, that's a great question too. So I actually, so let me step back a second. And remember I told you when I started this work, people were like, what are you going to do as a marine biologist? So you can only imagine a couple of years later, Channel 7 Australia did a news piece on my work, and it went viral. And then the government, like so many people wrote to me, and they were like, there are whales in our waters. So it's a very recent phenomenon, really, for most people. These whales have been here since the first maps of the world drawn by Ptolemy. They've been in the same place, but we just didn't know it. And so the government has come to terms with the fact that now there's whales, and suddenly I'm like, okay, we have to do these conservation things. I've been working on this particular problem since 2012, and it's been a little back and forth. So certainly the support has grown. As a woman in any field, as a woman in a country which is very male-dominated, you can only imagine that I've had lots of trouble. So for 12 years, the government wouldn't even talk to me. But then now, finally, they actually call me up, and they're like, Dr. Devos, we need some advice. Because I think I've hung around so long. They're like, oh, well, we might as well let her talk to us. So I feel like now we've made steps, right? And I think now they're like, okay, let's talk about this problem and what can be done. And because we're sort of going through this phase of economic development, then that was the latest concern they threw at me. And they were like, but it'll affect our economy. And I'm like, it won't. That's the point, you know? And so I just have, every time they come back with something, I'm like, hey, I've got an answer. We're okay. So I definitely think we're moving in the right direction. These are things that do take a little bit of time. But I'm an optimist. So I'm sure in the next couple of years, we'll have some good results.
So you alluded to the fact that they're not eating krill since it's a tropical environment. Have you been able to do fecal analysis, or do you have speculation of what they are feeding on?
Yeah, so we've done fecal analysis, and the publication is almost ready to get published, so I can't actually tell you what it was, but I was teasing you. So I'm going to leave you hanging, and so you can follow my work on all the social media at Oceanswell.org. We will reveal the results when they're out, but thank you for prompting that.
Hi, I'm starting a career in field recording on land, and I know that Roger Payne in the 60s and 70s recorded humpback whales, which was a really important moment. And I was wondering, are you using audio recording in your work? I know that, for example, they use beacons to warn whales to get out of shipping channels when the ships are coming. So I'm wondering if that's, how much a part of your work is that? And is there room for it in the future?
Yeah, okay, great question. So first off, so the whale research vessel that I originally worked on belonged to Roger Payne, so that's sort of my claim to fame. But apart from that, so the thing with blue whales is that off the east coast of the US, they use acoustics to kind of prevent ship strikes with right whales. But the problem with blue whales is that they're not that vocal, so it's quite difficult for us to use acoustics to triangulate where they are in the oceans. Also, Sri Lanka has one of the narrowest and continental shelves, so we have extremely deep water, really close to shore. And so to place sound recording devices is quite difficult. So it is quite challenging. We'd like to branch out and do more acoustic work just because we're really curious about how acoustics sort of evolve over time. Blue whales tend to be more static than humpback whales, but we do think there's lots of interesting things we can still discover, particularly as the oceans are getting increasingly noisy, and we know in other populations there have been shifts in frequency and stuff, so perhaps something that we'll look for in the future. Yep.
Could you help to explain that they're non-migratory, so are they not spotted in other regions of the world?
Yeah, so when I say they're non-migratory, they're confined to a very, very limited area in the northern Indian Ocean. So the extent of their range they go up to about Oman, and then down to about the Maldives, and the easternmost extent is actually east coast of Sri Lanka. So when you consider that compared to the range of blue whales everywhere else, which is, they'll go north and south, it's a very, very confined and limited range, so they're considered non-migratory for that reason. And it's nice and warm wherever they go, which I totally understand.
Hi. How much collaboration, I guess, is there between like Oceanswell and your research and your work and people working with whales in other parts of the world, including here? Like, how much do you guys all communicate and
Yeah.
work together?
Super question. So Oceanswell is now the parent organization for the project that I've been doing for over 10 years. It's called the Sri Lankan Blue Whale Project, and now I've absorbed it under Oceanswell. So that'll still continue to be the flagship project. And I collaborate extensively around the world. I actually did a postdoc 2 years ago at UC Santa Cruz. And I came out here specifically because I wanted to work with some of the NOAA teams from La Jolla who've been working on this exact same problem. So rather than reinventing the wheel and losing time for some of the, the modeling stuff and things where they'd already figured things out, I was like, why don't we work together? So I have collaborations with people actually all over the world to do different sorts of things. And I think that's the only true way to go about doing science. And, why not? It helps us to minimize the waste of resources, and also we get to learn a lot from each other. So, yeah.
So what are the main obstacles, or like what do you need to have happen to get the shipping channel moved and the speed regulations?
So to get a shipping channel to move, it's a simple thing to resolve, and it's been done in other parts of the world, but it's simple in the sense that it's a very clear-cut resolution. But of course, there are steps. So first of all, the government has to be completely on board. Then the government has to write a proposal, which actually means I will write the proposal for the government, and then they have to take it to the International Maritime Organization. But through this work, I've been communicating with the IMO as well for some time, and they're aware of the work because this work's been featured everywhere in New York Times and BBC and stuff like that. So there's a lot of awareness, and so as a result, they're aware that this is something that needs to be done. And also, to be really honest, there's a lot of shipping companies that have now voluntarily started moving offshore because they know this is an issue. So they don't want bad PR. It's they also have green goals, so this helps them to sort of achieve that. So, but there are still steps we have to go through.
Hi. I was wondering, since this pygmy blue whale is geographically isolated and it's a has it been given so specific recognition, and is there any protection in sight for this because it is geographically isolated?
Yeah, so they're still listed as data deficient in the IUCN Red List as a subgroup. But certainly, we lump them together with blue whales in general and just say endangered. I'm sure once we get the genetic work out, we'll be able to push more for a specific status for this particular population.
Hi, 3 short questions. How often do your blue whales calve? How many calves might a female have over her lifetime? And why is the poop red?
And why is the poop red? Oh, yeah. Yes! Why did it take so long to get that question? So, how often do they calve? So, the mystery, we see baby little calves maybe once or twice a year, but because it's literally, this work's been going on for about 10 years, and that's not a lot of time to be able to really answer those questions. Typically, they'll have one calf in every cycle. It's hard to know really how many times they'll calve through their lives. So that's also something a little bit of an unknown. And why is the poop red? Because they feed on things that are tiny shrimp-like creatures. Okay, that's still a broad group, guys. And they have these oils in their bodies that basically make the poop red. But I genuinely think it's incredibly beautiful. And I really am up for a challenge. So if anyone does have better-looking animal poop.
This is going to be our last question.
Thank you. So you had those black hotspots where you were seeing the whales in the different areas. Are you seeing the same whales in one area after the other? That's my first question. And the second one is, have you seen them have sex yet?
No, I haven't seen them have sex yet. And nobody in this whole world has ever seen a blue whale having sex, which is exactly why I was more excited at that point. But I am on a quest, so stay tuned. follow my work, but and the black dots. So we don't know because we spend most of our time on the south coast, and so our seasons are based on the monsoons. So the south coast will have great seas at certain times of the year, and then the seas will get really rough. So at that point, the whales may move, but we don't really know. And the whales are around the coast. I've gone through the rough seas and I've seen whales, but we haven't been on the water long enough to say if the same individual is moving up and down or what. But there's definitely throughout the year, there's all whales all around.
Great. Well, I want to give a big round of applause. Stay on stage. Don't be so shy.
Thank you.
To Asha. I know many of you had more questions, and this is always kind of a bittersweet moment. We have to wrap these things up, but Asha's here all day. We've got 30 minutes in between each session, and you can go to her table, which is right outside these doors, and go and speak with her. So take advantage of that. You can do that with all the speakers. I do have one quick announcement. Hopefully I remember the details. Apparently there is a car running with its engine on and nobody in it. It's a beige Honda Accord from Walnut Creek in the parking garage. So if that sounds like your car, you might want to go check it out. So you can go out through these doors, start doing some shopping, start doing some networking, and come back in about 30 minutes later. Thank you.